Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy, and I'm filling in this morning for Adam Briskin-Limehouse, who is sick. So I'm a little nervous. Please bear with me. Ooh. And today, I'd like to tell you a story. Did the clicker go? There we go. So, I was born in 1997. I spent the first 20 years of my life in the evangelical church. And considering what's going on in the world right now, I think it's important and interesting for us here at WES to know a little bit about what it's like to grow up in and eventually leave that movement. So let me give you a little backstory. My parents joined the evangelical movement when I was still in diapers because they were disillusioned with the Methodist Church's tendency to allow women in positions of leadership. They joined a church in my hometown that was built on a street called Narrow Lane. They built that street and named it Narrow Lane because small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. I don't want to call this a cult, so I'll let you make your determination about that when I'm done today. Growing up, my entire life was centered around the church. My church ran a K through 12 school, so from kindergarten through 12th grade, I was in church. 5 days a week at school, twice a day on Sunday, Wednesday night Bible study, Saturday evening house church, constant. And you might be wondering, Amy, what does it even mean to be evangelical? That's a great question. Evangelicals take the Bible literally. I learned that every single word of it was 100% literal and inerrant, which means perfect. There's no mistakes, no flaws, directly from the mouth of the big guy himself. We would literally use the term, Scripture is God-breathed. Evangelicals also believe that sharing the good news is a mandate. You must go into the whole world and make disciples. Evangelize. They take it pretty seriously. We would pester anyone within earshot about how good it was to be saved. Saved from what, though? Evangelicals believe in a very literal hell. I remember being in Sunday school as a young child, being shown videos about what hell looked like, what it felt like, encouraged to imagine the flame and the horror and the separation from God that all sinners would feel someday. I was baptized at the age of 10 because the nightmares this doctrine gave me kept me awake at night. We believe that almost everyone, every person who was ever born almost, would end up burning for all eternity. Remember that narrow path to salvation? Your time was short to get on the straight and narrow. But why was it so short? Evangelicals are apocalyptic. Whether it's the rapture or some other nightmare scenario where God looks down on the earth on a random Tuesday and decides to peel the sky open and rain down his fire and judgment. There's a big emphasis on eschatology, a word that no 9-year-old has any business knowing, which means the study of the end times. Evangelicals overwhelmingly believe that we are living through the end of days, which is why they don't care about climate change, by the way. But more than anything, though, evangelicals believe in black and white. There are no shades of gray in the evangelical world. Everything can be classified as sinful or holy, and that includes people. You are expected to be on fire for Christ. And we would even say that being a lukewarm Christian was worse than never being a Christian at all. So the question I'm sure you're asking is, why am I here? How did I get on this stage? Well, like I said, Adam was sick this morning. But no, it's another great question. You guys are with it this morning. I was raised to be an obedient soldier in the Lord's army, there's a lot to unpack there. But the story starts to get interesting when I was about 19 and I learned about evolution for the first time. It's every evangelical child's terrifying test of faith. I had to leave the fold for a few days a week to venture into the belly of hell itself. Biology 101. at a local community college. I had been prepared for this moment from a very young age because you see, when you're an evangelical kid who grows up loving science, you don't get Bill Nye, the evolution guy. You get Ken Ham and Kent Hovind, the creationists. They taught me to be terribly cheeky in my biology class. If a test asked me to talk about the age of the Earth, I was told, you should write, the answer you're looking for is 4.5 billion years old, but the Bible teaches me that it is 6,000 years old. I was a little too scared of getting a bad grade to actually do this, and even worse, reading the science book was actually pretty convincing. If you could imagine. It turned out the more books I got access to, the more I questioned my faith. It wasn't just science, it was history, philosophy, and religion too. I think I had just about figured out the real reason the Civil War happened in the interesting year of 2016. Now, I don't know what your 2016 was like, but let me tell you, it was a weird time to be an evangelical teenager. If I repeated all of the horrible things I heard from the pulpit and from my community, we would be here all day. And you can ask me another time if you've got a strong stomach for bigotry. The open-armed embrace of Donald Trump by the evangelical church was a shock to my family. Even my parents, who had been faithful members of the church for 20 years, felt appalled by the lack of morals and the open depravity of that man. My mother's line in the sand was that Trump owns casinos. And according to her, real Christians don't profit off of addiction. I can respect that about my parents. They had a line in the sand and they stuck by it. My husband Joseph and I would start dating a couple months from then, but we bonded over our mutual horror at looking at the people we looked up to and trusted. We'd known our whole lives. The people who taught us that loving your neighbor was the most important commandment in the Bible. And we saw them fall for what seemed like a clear test of their Christian principles. It was a lot to take in. And in addition to the national chaos, that same year in 2016, a local scandal rocked my small community. My church's youth minister was sentenced to prison for sexually abusing a friend of mine, who was a minor, for years. I decided I needed to get out. That next fall, I transferred to a state school to finish my degree, and in that time, I felt like I was in a free fall. All I had ever learned was the evangelical worldview. I didn't know anyone outside of the faith. I didn't know how to talk to people who didn't grow up steeped in that culture. And I also felt like my understanding of the world was unraveling. I wasn't sure I believed in God anymore. And that used to be the most important part of my identity. For 20 years, I believed that my soul, my salvation, where I would spend eternity, relied on a faith that was turning to ash in my hands. No one ever told me how lonely it would be to lose your faith, how much it felt like grieving a death. And after spending a fair amount of time at the bottom of a bottle during college, I decided to go to therapy. Evangelical Christianity never gave me the joy and peace it promised it would, but neither did the nihilistic spiral of atheism I found myself in. It was hard getting out of bed because everything just felt so pointless. If no one created me, and no one ever heard the 2 decades of prayer I had offered, why did I even exist, is how I felt. Deconstructing the faith that was forced upon me felt like weeding a garden until there was nothing left alive inside of me. I decided I needed to plant something new. But what, dear WES members? What could possibly take the place of a faith community without the harmful beliefs and toxic behavior? You know, there's this little place on 16th Street near Silver Spring. And we found WES, and life is better now. So now's the part of my talk today where I'm going to share some takeaways from the EX-vangelical experience. And I'm going to start with something a little controversial, but hear me out. Here are some things I think WES can learn from the evangelical church. Number 1, organizing and focus. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a bit of a hostile takeover happening right now in our country. And let me be very clear. Evangelicals are an unpopular minority in this country. Less than 1/3 of Americans regularly attend any religious services, let alone Christian ones. Less than 1/4 of Christians are evangelical. So how is it that they're always up in our business and they're gaining ground? There's no use in mincing words here. Evangelicals get shit done. They are laser-focused and highly motivated. They hit their talking points over and over ad nauseum, whether or not those points are grounded in reality. They know how to energize their base and weaponize fear and get people who wouldn't otherwise participate in their goals fired up. I'll use the example of abortion rights. Except in the most extreme circles, evangelicals aren't doing their supervillain speeches about how much they want to suppress women and people who are capable of getting pregnant. No, they're saying, we are saving millions of babies from murder and repeating it over and over until the facts don't matter anymore. And I don't say this to mean we need to make up things. We actually don't, because the facts are on our side. Imagine the power our voice would have if we could rally around climate change action with that same fervor that anti-choice advocates have. Because guess what? A higher percentage of people say that climate change needs to be our number 1 priority than people who go to church every week. We've got the numbers. The next one is evangelizing. Scary word. Oh. Evangelizing. When I say that we would pester anyone within earshot about Jesus, I really meant it. I still get people asking me to come to their Bible studies and see if I'm saved. And on this point, I have to admit, we are on our back foot. After all, you can't really say that if you miss a Sunday at WES, your salvation is in jeopardy. And that's good. I love the fact that we give one another the space to disconnect and recharge. I want us to be brave about sharing the benefits of a community like this. We should be proud of everything we've built here. And frankly, it's more impressive because we don't, for the most part, believe we're getting any kind of divine assistance in this. We build this community. We take care of one another, and we do it because we simply believe that it is the right thing to do. I think it's fair to say that I am more on fire for humanism than I ever was for the Lord. That's about as much televangelizing as I'm going to do today. You can take the girl out of the evangelical church, but you can't stop me from getting a little hellfire and brimstone energy every once in a while. So now I want to talk about some of the best things at WES. These are the things I think we absolutely sweep the evangelical church in. No doctrine, dogma, or orthodoxy. Y'all are so much more chill than evangelicals, it's crazy. We don't spend entire days arguing about whether you can wear hats in the room where platform happens. We don't spend years of time debating the godly role of women in our community. We accept new perspectives with open arms and a flexibility that is an impressive strength. That being said, disagreements are welcome. We disagree sometimes, and that was a culture shock. I remember the first couple of times that we came to WES, Joseph and I were a little mortified by the idea of community sharing. Because you know what? That would never work in an evangelical church, not in 6,000 years. The first time someone got up and said, "Casey, I actually disagree with something you said today." That took me a week to recover from. You can't disagree with the preacher, you'll get punished. Socially ostracized. Nowadays, though, community sharing is one of my favorite things that we do here. Respectful disagreements are a sign of a healthy relationship and community. And I even do it myself sometimes, partially just to prove that women belong on stage. We deserve to share the microphone and have our voices be heard. This next one is really important to me. We treat our young people like they're people. There's an overwhelming pattern of thought in conservative circles that children are nothing more than an extension of their parents, almost property. They shelter them from just about everything, including science and history and the fact that LGBTQ+ people have always existed and we will continue to exist no matter what they feel. Children are expected to comply with their parents or be punished. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Or, as the head evangelist at my church used to say, break their will when they're 2, and they won't break your heart when they're 15. We don't do that here. And that is a testament and strength to our community, that we said that is not acceptable anytime, any place. When I look through the WES library and I see the resources our kids and teens get access to, and I see how they are treated by all of you, it honestly makes me tear up if I think about it too much, because I know how profoundly that knowledge would have helped me when I was a kid, because I know how badly I wanted to understand the world around me, only to be told that my questions sounded too much like doubt, and I needed to focus on fitting in and making the faith work. WES's youth have the beautiful opportunity to learn who they are and know that it will be celebrated by everyone here. This next one's a little more lighthearted. More than one book. Imagine that. A fun fact about me is that I read the Bible cover to cover, Genesis through Revelations, about a dozen times when I was 18. They just don't give you that many other options. Even the textbooks I had included biblical application chapters in math textbooks. I was even a part of a competitive Bible memorization team. We don't have time to unpack all that, but you should ask me about it sometime because TLC actually did a TV show about it. And it's so weird, y'all. But since being at WES, I have learned so very much about the world and philosophy and history and music, politics, science, and the fullest spectrum of humanity just by being a part of this community. I get so many cool and thoughtful recommendations from you all that I think I'm going to be spending the rest of my life discovering everything I can. And speaking of rediscovering, discovery and depth. Mine and Joseph's favorite thing in the world is rediscovering Christian aphorisms organically. These are just the sayings that were on rote and constantly repeated. I used to hear them all the time. And I was just a kid, so I never really understand the depths and universality that some of these sayings truly have. One time, Casey, Joseph, and I were talking a little bit after recording Ethically Sourced the podcast, which y'all should check out. And Casey said something along the lines of, if every person's essence or soul is like a different gemstone all tumbling around together, we're trying to polish one another and make each other shine. And Joseph and I exchanged a shit-eating grin and said, so as iron sharpens iron, so another person sharpens another? Which is a verse from the Bible, if you're from, I think, Isaiah. It's been a while since I've read that book again, but... Or I could talk about the verse in the book of Mark that inspired the title of my talk today. For what shall it profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul? I'm not a man, so I don't think I'm in jeopardy of that. I could bombard you with a couple dozen of these fun discoveries that I've come to treasure because it feels like reclaiming a piece of my soul that evangelicalism tried to stifle. But we don't have all morning, and you can always ask me out for some coffee. But I want to leave off this morning with my favorite rediscovery. We are part of the world. I used to hear this saying all the time. Christians need to be in the world, but not of the world. If I were to specify this statement, I might charitably say that we could use this as a reminder to not get lost in the day-to-day stress of the world, the news, and maybe practice a little mindfulness. But evangelicals basically use this saying to say, Stay inside and stop being so gay. What I love about WES is that we are in this world, for better or for worse. We care about what happens to this world because we know that what happens here, what happens to our neighbors, happens to us too. I am done blocking out the world to focus on whatever happens in a theoretical afterlife. And frankly, I'm tired of pretending like the world is about to end. The world is here. I am here. And I'm here with you. And we have work to do. Thank you.